It was just another cold, rainy evening in a small, run-down diner on the edge of town. The kind of place where dreams feel far away, and most people are just trying to get through the day. Inside, a young waitress named Sarah moved from table to table, tired but still wearing a warm smile. Life hadn't been easy for her. She worked long hours, barely earning enough to cover her bills. And yet, she always found time to help others. That's just who she was, kind, selfless, and full of heart. As the night dragged on, Sarah noticed something strange. A little boy, no older than 8, sat quietly at the back booth, his clothes soaked, his eyes tired and distant. He wasn't with an adult. No one seemed to be looking for him. Most of the customers didn't even notice him. But Sarah did. There was something in his eyes, a quiet kind of fear, the kind you don't see in children unless they've been through more than they should. She brought him a warm meal on the house and gently asked him if he was okay. At first, he said nothing, but the more she spoke to him, the more he began to open up. The story that came out of that little boy's mouth broke her heart. He didn't give too many details, just enough to understand that his home wasn't safe, and he had no one to turn to. Sarah knew she couldn't just walk away. She could have ignored it, kept her head down, like so many people do when they're scared to get involved. But that wasn't her way. She took a chance. She made a call that changed both of their lives forever. Years passed. Sarah never forgot about that night or the boy with the sad eyes. Life moved on, though not much changed for her. She still worked hard, still struggled, still gave what little she had to others. Then one ordinary afternoon, there was a knock at her door. She opened it, and standing there was a man in a sleek suit, looking completely out of place on her worn-out porch. A luxury car idled behind him. He introduced himself, and then said something that made Sarah drop the dish she was holding. He remembered her, and what he came to do would leave her speechless. Sarah stared at the man on her doorstep, stunned. The sunlight hit his face just right, and something in his eyes tugged at her memory. They weren't unfamiliar, deep, kind, but carrying a weight. Before she could say anything, he spoke again. "You probably don't remember me," he said softly, "but I remember you. You saved my life." Her heart skipped a beat. The voice, the eyes, and then it clicked. That little boy from the diner, all grown up. He told her his name, and it was like a piece of the past had suddenly stepped back into her world. But now he wasn't that quiet, frightened child anymore. He stood tall, confident, dressed like someone who had made it far in life. Sarah was speechless. He asked if he could come in, and she nodded, still trying to wrap her mind around what was happening. Inside her small, cozy kitchen, they sat down. He looked around, almost like he was remembering something from long ago. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly, but his eyes stayed serious. He began telling her about everything that had happened since that night at the diner. After Sarah called for help, he was placed into protective care. It wasn't an easy road, but that one act of kindness had opened a door he never knew existed. He was taken in by a loving foster family, given the chance to go to school, to grow, to dream. Over the years, he worked hard, harder than most. And now, after building a successful company from the ground up, he had become a billionaire. But he never forgot the woman who had stepped in when no one else did. Sarah listened, overwhelmed. She couldn't believe the little boy she once fed was now sitting in her kitchen, telling her this incredible story. But there was something in his tone, something unsettled. He wasn't just here to say thank you. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I found out, and it involves you. I've been looking for you for years." His words hung heavy in the air. Her stomach turned. The room suddenly felt smaller. Sarah tried to stay calm, but her thoughts were racing. Why now? Why her? What had he found? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. He placed it gently on the table between them. "Before you open that," he said, "just know, everything you thought you knew might change." Sarah looked at the envelope, her hands trembling. She wasn't sure she wanted to know what was inside. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Sarah stared at the envelope lying on her kitchen table. Her fingers hovered over it, but something held her back. The man, now a billionaire, watched her with a strange mix of anticipation and concern. He looked powerful, polished, and successful. But beneath all of that, she could still see a glimpse of the boy he once was. The boy who sat alone in her diner booth, scared and quiet. She finally picked up the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and she froze. It wasn't just a letter. It was a legal document, an old report, faded but still readable. Her name was on it, not just as a witness, but as someone connected to a bigger case, one she didn't even know existed. She looked up at him, confused. "What is this?" He took a breath, his voice lower now. "After I got out, the authorities opened a file on what had been happening to me. But they also uncovered a larger pattern, one that went beyond my situation. It turned out there were more kids, more stories like mine, and your name came up again and again. You helped more people than you realized, Sarah." Her chest tightened. She had always done what she could to look out for others, customers, strangers, kids who seemed lost. But she never imagined it had reached that far. "Why didn't anyone ever say anything?" she whispered. He looked down. "That's where it gets complicated. Someone didn't want the truth getting out. Someone powerful. There were efforts to shut the case down. And I think they've been keeping an eye on you. That's why I had to find you. Before they did." Sarah felt a chill crawl up her spine. She had lived a quiet life. She'd never thought she was part of something bigger, certainly not something dangerous. The idea that someone had been watching her, for years maybe, was terrifying. But it also didn't make sense. Who would care about a poor waitress from a small town? He continued, "After I started looking into my past, I hired some investigators. What they found, it led back to a company, a name, a secret that someone paid a lot to bury. And you, without even knowing it, you were a key part of it all." Sarah's thoughts raced. Questions piled up. What did she know? What had she seen? What was she part of? And more importantly, what was coming next? Outside, a black car slowly rolled down her street. The engine barely made a sound. But Sarah noticed. So did he. And neither of them said a word. Sarah's eyes locked onto the sleek black car inching down her quiet street. It wasn't just passing by. It was moving too slowly, too deliberately. The man across from her noticed too, and his jaw tightened. He stood up from the table and pulled the curtain back just enough to peek through. His voice was steady but firm. "We don't have much time." She felt her chest tighten. "What do you mean? Who is that?" Her voice shook more than she wanted it to. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat again and placed a small USB drive on the table beside the envelope. "Everything we found is on here. Names, transactions, reports. It's enough to blow the whole thing open. But if they know I gave this to you." His words trailed off, but the silence said everything. Sarah stared at the drive, her mind spinning. Her simple, quiet life had just shattered in the span of minutes. This wasn't just about helping a scared child years ago. It was deeper, bigger, and suddenly very dangerous. The man who once sat in her diner with rain in his eyes, now looked like someone who had been carrying a secret for far too long. And Sarah felt the weight of it pressing on both of them. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why bring this to me after all these years?" He looked her in the eye. "Because you're the only one I trust. Everyone else has a price. You didn't. You gave without expecting anything. That matters." The black car had now stopped across the street. The engine went quiet. Two men in dark suits stepped out, looking around. Not in a friendly way. "We need to move," he said quickly. "They'll knock any second. And they won't just ask questions." Sarah's hands trembled as she grabbed the USB and slipped it into her pocket. Her thoughts jumped from one thing to another. Her job at the diner, her small apartment, the ordinary life she'd built. Was all of it about to be ripped away? She didn't even know what she was really holding, but she could feel the danger. A knock echoed through the house. Not gentle, not patient. He looked at her one last time. "No matter what happens next, don't give that drive to anyone." "Not yet. You'll know when the time is right." The knock came again, louder this time. Then the sound of a hand gripping the doorknob. Sarah stepped back, her heart racing, the room suddenly spinning. And just as the door began to open, everything around her seemed to stop. The door creaked open slowly, casting a long shadow across the wooden floor. Sarah held her breath, heart thudding like a drum in her chest. But instead of the men in black suits she expected, a woman stepped inside, tall, polished, dressed in gray. Her eyes scanned the room with practiced calm, but they landed directly on Sarah. "Miss Thompson," she said smoothly, "we need to speak with you. Now." The man beside Sarah tensed. She could feel a shift in him, controlled but alert. "She's not going anywhere," he said firmly, stepping between them. The woman didn't flinch. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," she replied. "But there are people on the way who won't be as polite. You have something they want. And once they know it's here, they won't knock again." Sarah's voice finally broke through her panic. "Who are you?" The woman glanced over her shoulder, as if checking for someone behind her. "Let's just say I used to work with them. Then I found out too much." "Like you just did." Her eyes narrowed on the billionaire. "You shouldn't have come here. You've put her in more danger than you know." He took a step forward. "You were part of the system that covered this up." The woman didn't deny it. "I was. But I walked away, or tried to." She turned back to Sarah, her voice urgent. "Listen carefully. That drive doesn't just contain names and numbers. It has a record, something we didn't know existed. A hidden file. It proves someone very high up in the government helped fund the cover-up." Sarah's stomach turned. This was no longer just about a corporate scandal or a forgotten report. Now it reached into places she had no business being. Places that didn't care who got hurt as long as secrets stayed buried. A car door slammed outside. Then another. The woman stepped further inside and shut the door quietly behind her. "They're here," she whispered. "We don't have time. There's a second copy of that file, and they think I have it. But they're wrong. It's still hidden." The billionaire looked at her sharply. "Where?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her coat and slid a folded note into Sarah's hand. "This will lead you to it, but only if you make it out of here." A loud bang suddenly shook the front door. Not a knock, something harder. They were out of time. Sarah clutched the note tightly, her pulse racing. She looked at the stranger and the man whose life she'd once saved, and realized they were now both depending on her. Whatever was coming next, there was no turning back. The front door shattered open with a crash, sending splinters across the floor. Sarah instinctively ducked behind the kitchen counter, gripping the note and USB drive tight in her fist. The billionaire and the mysterious woman had already moved, taking cover on either side of the room as two figures in black stormed in, weapons drawn. Not the kind you'd see on local cops, but clean, quiet, professional. These weren't ordinary men. The woman reached for something in her jacket, but the billionaire stopped her with a shake of his head. "Not yet," he whispered. They waited, barely breathing. The men swept through the front room slowly, methodically, until one of them caught sight of Sarah peeking out. "There," he shouted. The next few seconds moved in a blur. The woman pulled a flash device from her pocket, slammed it on the floor, and in a burst of white light and smoke, chaos erupted. Sarah felt someone grab her arm. It was the billionaire. He pulled her toward the back door as the woman shouted something they couldn't make out. Alarms started going off nearby. Someone had triggered a silent alert. Maybe she had planned for this. Maybe it was part of something bigger. They ran into the alley behind Sarah's house, her heart pounding so hard she couldn't think straight. "We can't go back," she gasped. "No," he said. "We go to the address on that note." Now, they didn't stop running until they reached the edge of town, where an abandoned factory sat quiet and forgotten. The address led them to a metal storage unit inside. Sarah's hands shook as she unlocked the door using a code written on the back of the note. Inside, there was a single metal box. The billionaire opened it slowly. Inside was a second USB drive, smaller, marked with nothing. He plugged it into his laptop, and his eyes widened. "It's all here. Everything. The real files. The recordings, the payments, the names. It's worse than we thought." Sarah leaned over to look. There were government documents, private messages, even video clips. Real proof. This wasn't just a scandal, it was a system built on silence and money. As they copied the files, a soft voice echoed behind them. "I told you I'd find it." They turned around, shocked. It was the woman. Alone. Calm, but her expression had changed. Cold. "I never left their side," she said, pulling out a silencer. "And you just led me right to it." The billionaire stepped in front of Sarah. And in that moment, Sarah realized this story wasn't just about saving a child. It was about exposing a lie that had reached into every part of power. But someone still wasn't ready to let the truth come out. Time froze in that moment. The woman stood still, her weapon aimed, but her hand trembled slightly. The billionaire raised his hand slowly, shielding Sarah. "You don't have to do this," he said, voice steady. "It's over. We have everything. You can still walk away from this." But she shook her head, eyes cold now, her loyalty to the truth long buried under fear and power. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If this gets out, I lose everything. They'll come for me next." Sarah stepped out from behind him, heart pounding. She didn't know where the courage came from. Maybe it was all the years of being overlooked, underestimated, forgotten. But now, standing in the middle of something so much bigger than her, she finally saw it clearly. "Then help us," she said. "This can't keep going. People are still being hurt." For a long second, no one moved. Then, without a word, the woman lowered the gun and stepped back. Her shoulders slumped, the tension finally breaking. "I'll give you 1 hour," she said quietly. "After that, I never saw you." And just like that, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the old factory. The billionaire didn't waste a second. He uploaded the files to 3 different servers and sent them to a list of trusted contacts. Journalists, legal teams, people who had waited years for the truth. Sarah watched as the lies unraveled right in front of her, and for the first time, it felt like justice might finally win. In the days that followed, headlines exploded across the country. A billion-dollar cover-up exposed. Corrupt officials arrested. Hidden abuse cases reopened. Sarah's name wasn't in the news, but she didn't need it to be. She had already done her part years ago when she chose to care about a scared little boy in a diner booth. That same boy, now a powerful man, stayed in touch with her. Not because he owed her, but because she had become like family. He helped her move out of the small apartment, opened doors for her she never imagined. But more than anything, he reminded her of something she'd nearly forgotten, that one small act of kindness could change a life. And as Sarah sat on the porch of her new home, watching the sun rise with a cup of warm coffee in hand, she thought back to that rainy night in the diner. She hadn't been rich or powerful. She just cared. And somehow that had been enough to change everything.